Hello, this is Eric Topol, editor-in-chief of Medscape, and I'm here on the podcast of Medicine the Machine with my co-host, Dr. Abraham Verghese, and we welcome today with tremendous enthusiasm, Dr. Robert Harrington, the chair of the Department of Medicine at Stanford. And we're going to have a great discussion, I know. Welcome, Bob.
Eric, thanks for having me, both to you and to Abraham.
You know, we have had a lot of discussions about the pandemic over the past few years, but the one that seems really missing is how do academic centers deal with, I guess for better lack of term, rogue faculty members. I mean, that's really what we want to get into today, among other things. And I wonder if you could give us just some overview thoughts about this, because I know you have given it a fair amount of thought previously.
Yeah. So first off, thanks for entertaining the question, because I think it's something that maybe is more quietly talked about than it ought to be. And I say that, Eric, because I think that most of us who are in the academy, and all three of us have been in it for a long time, really cherish the open discussion of ideas and debate. We like to go to conferences and ask questions and even argue as we look at different sides of an issue. And so the natural instinct of academics, including myself, is to be very solicitous of new ideas, to be very open to new ideas, and to even tolerate what I'll call extreme ideas, with the notion that those kind of debates and discussions ultimately are the best of what goes on in the university. But COVID brought out a different issue. And the issue was that we had unprecedented in our three lifetimes, a truly global public health emergency. The science was moving incredibly fast. What we knew changed sometimes day by day as new pieces of information became known. And there were voices in our community, including on our own campus, that maybe were those voices really out there that were then latched onto by a variety of forces in society, sometimes out of naivete, sometimes out of, I think, malicious intent. And we ended up in this situation where the public was confused, where even well-intended people weren't sure what to do. And I think over the last couple of years, as I've thought about it a lot, it's left us in a very difficult situation. And the situation is something like this. How do you, in an environment that's dedicated to open and free discourse, really have the difficult conversation about what is truth and what is not truth, and what is fair to talk about and what really is unfair to the broader public health? It raises question of individual freedom versus societal good. When does one have to suppress potentially one's individual freedom for the better good of all? So those are some of the things I've thought about a lot, Eric and Abraham, over the last few years, and would love your thoughts, would love to maybe probe deeper into the dialogue. I certainly have other things I'd like to say about it.
Bob, it's great to see you in this format. I have to share with the readers that my office is actually right next to Dr. Harrington's, and so I get to see him on a regular basis. But the COVID times were really poignant for both of us. For me, especially, to watch Bob as chair of medicine show up every single day, which was a powerful message, given that the rest of the office was pretty much empty. And I found myself trying to go more often, mostly to keep him company so he wouldn't be so solitary. And it was really interesting to see, on top of everything else we had to deal with, beds situations and changing directives, to have to deal with what seemed like voices that were, working against the seam, so to speak, really not helping. And I found myself just looking up what the definition of academic freedom meant when it was originally formulated. And of course, it goes back a long, long way. But one of the tenets of it is that within your discipline, one should be fairly free to speak about what one knows about. And one should be free to construct the curriculum in any fashion that one wants to. And there is a distinction made a lot of the times between that and free speech. Free speech, First Amendment, is available to every citizen. But, for example, free speech in an academic environment, a student doesn't have a right to get up in the class and disrupt the professor's lecture, because that's not the place for free speech. Academic freedom doesn't cover them in that sense, it covers them in other senses. So I think this was a time of great learning for all of us. And Bob, would you say that the issue was that people outside of disciplines of their expertise were weighing in on things that they didn't necessarily know much about? They didn't really have a body of work that allowed them to weigh in on those things.
Well, Abraham, as I know, having made bedside rounds with you, that you like to employ the Socratic method. In this case, I think you're asking me the proverbial rhetorical question. People ventured out of their area of expertise all the time. Why did people do that? I tend to think the best of the situation. I tend to not think that there's a nefarious opportunity that people are trying to exploit. But in this case, I do think that some of our colleagues got caught up in the bright lights of the moment, and they liked being on news stations. They liked being quoted in the newspaper. They liked being a contrarian, and sometimes being a contrarian is really helpful. It makes you think of the other possibilities, and maybe I've been challenged with my days ago. I say, you know what, maybe I'm wrong. But there were other times during this I said, I'm not wrong. I've done this for 30-something years. And I do know what's right in human subjects research. I do know what's right when we're thinking about some of the public health issues. And I worried a lot, Abraham, that the intent was not always one to find the truth, but the intent was rather to promote one's own idea. And there's a difference there.
And it wasn't even just that. It was also, it's characterized by all sorts of ad hominem attacks. So your point was a good one about, appealing and becoming, very popular on Fox News, for example, which has been responsible for a lot of COVID mis and disinformation, but also taking on in not collegial by any means means of people who were trying to stand up for what are facts, what are truths. And getting to the clinical trials point that you mentioned, which is central, Bob, you and I have done a lot of clinical trials in our times. And we think we know how to interpret a clinical trial and what's a rigorous clinical trial. And then we have these people that have never done a clinical trial, basically coming up with a complete, not just skewed, but just extraordinarily off-base interpretation and then making attacks. But, one of the things that really took place here to give these individuals strength of power is social media. So it's really interesting. I discussed this with our mutual friend, Bob Wachter. And I said to him, because he has one in particular very difficult character at UCSF. I said, well, did you ever meet with him to discuss the things that we're talking about? And he says, well, first thing, he's not in my department. Second, well, we did meet with him. And, we told him what he's doing, what he's writing, what he's saying is completely false. And it's bad for the reputation of the institution. But he did admit that there's not only the concern about muting him or somehow restricting his ability to speak out, but also the fear of being taken on social media. So could you comment about this dynamic?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. And I think the way that you framed it up from the beginning, the ad hominem attack, as you know, I'm very active on social media, not as active as you, but I'm very active on social media, have been for a long time. And have a podcast that I discuss things, actually also on Medscape. 10 years ago, approximately 10 years ago, Clyde Yancey and I had a conversation. Clyde is for the listeners, is the chief of cardiology at Northwestern University and a very well-known person in cardiovascular medicine. Clyde and I had a conversation on civility in social media. This was in the early days of social media. And we made the comment that, debate, discuss, disagree with each other, but do it with a sense of civility. Do it with a sense of professional behavior. Don't do something online that you wouldn't do looking at somebody in the eye. I mean, in human relations, civility means a lot. I don't think it's an old-fashioned term. We actually updated it 3 or 4 later and did a second podcast. And so some of these things are, I would say, hiding behind a name that you don't know who the person is, and a picture that doesn't depict who they are. My view has always been, if you want to say something, number one, say it out loud with your own name attached, with your own picture attached, and put it out there. That's what good academics do. They put it down. They say, here, this is, I did this study. This is what I found, and this is what I'm putting forward. Number two, treat people as you would like to be treated. Don't make fun of people. Don't pile on if a lot of other people are piling on. Treat people respectfully. Treat people with civility. Treat them with a sense of professionalism. And, the individual that you're referring to makes fun of people all the time, says things sarcastically, says things that I would say that are mean and not respectful. And to me, that lowers the quality of that person's remarks, because one tends to attack when one doesn't really have meaningful things to say. And it happens all over the web. It's one of the things that many days discourages me and says, you know what, I'm going to give up this Twitter stuff. I don't want to be out there, because why? And as you both know well, it's a reflection of greater society. I mean, the total lack of civility in public discourse is depressing. I've been told by my own superiors that, well, we don't want to be responsible for muting people's speech. And I've said in retort, well, what if what they're doing is harmful? What about this notion that you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater? Isn't that the same if you're saying that vaccines aren't helpful or that there's no myocarditis occurring with COVID? I mean, isn't that akin to yelling fire in a crowded movie theater, that you're spewing falsehoods and getting people maybe to be hurt intentionally or inadvertently?
Bob, as you know, things came to a head at Stanford where about 80 of us were signatories on a document that basically, said that we felt that this individual on our faculty, was poorly representing the university and that they had their facts wrong. And of course, he threatened to sue all of us, which would have been a delight if he'd ever carried it out, but he never did. But I think a lot of us had the feeling that we shouldn't have had to write that letter, that it was really the function of the university, of its governance, to rein in someone who was, clearly, even though they had the president's ear at the time, they were not basing their remarks on scientific facts. So the question is, what is the role of, the person leading the department, the dean, the president? What is the administrator's role in that kind of a setting?
It's a great question, Abraham, and I remember the episode well. I also remember that sort of, in all of these tragedies, sometimes a good thing happens. And in that particular one, law school professors and others were able to acquire the services of a large law firm pro bono for the 80 plus members, and wrote a very powerful letter in retort that said that this is, go ahead, come after us and we'll come after you. It's unfortunate that the whole thing happened, but there was some powerful good news that some people were willing on our campus to stand up and take a perspective. I think that what happens at administrative levels is that people feel this sense of real tension of, am I violating somebody else's rights in order to support another group's rights? And do we actually know what's right and wrong here? In that particular case that you make reference to, I would say we did know what was right and wrong. One group of people, and one person in particular, was spewing all sorts of untruthful and inaccurate information, which might have ultimately been harmful to the public health. And that, to me, is when it crosses a line. Again, I can tolerate, what's the old saying? I vehemently disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death your right to say it. That's not what this is. This is somebody who who, based on education, should know better and training should know better. And for whatever reason, political beliefs or otherwise, was taking a different position. And at some point, I think when it's harmful to either an individual's health or to the public health, in which case this was the situation, that needs to be dealt with and that needs to be addressed. And universities have a variety of ways to do that. But I think that people tread lightly because they're uncertain where those boundaries are. And there were some very prominent people on our campus who felt that any critique at all is wrong. All sorts of, tolerance of these things should be allowed. I don't agree with that.
I think the problem is, and it's now, it's happened at leading universities, Stanford, we mentioned UCSF, Johns Hopkins, and others, where there are particular faculty members who are saying, writing, and incessantly things that are wrong, that are not backed up by data. They're fostering conspiracy theories. Like, for example, that myocarditis after vaccines is far worse than the benefits, or that absolutely no question masks don't work. Here you had the main advisor to the Trump administration, the radiologist, who wasn't part of your department, I know, Bob, but he, as part of the Hoover Institute, I guess, was very active in saying and writing things that were completely off the wall. Now, the question is about freedom of speech and academic freedom that Abraham brought up. When do you cross the line? When in the middle, as you said, Bob, in a public health emergency. In fact, some of this was during the true existential threat phase before we had any vaccines or treatments or whatever. How do you tolerate that these individuals can detract from great universities' reputation? Where is this a fuzzy line, or should be something there should be a protocol for universities to be able to defend themselves against individuals who are, just really crossing whatever you want to call this line?
Yeah, and I like the way you said that, Eric, that we were in the existential threat phase because, you can look back and you say, well, things went in a certain direction. But at that point, we didn't know, and Abraham gave the example. I came to work every day in those days and was frightened many days because I didn't know what was going to happen. And we were going to have enough beds in the hospital. We're going to have doctors taking care of them. Were there going to be, was our whole faculty going to get sick? We reached some crisis moments that Abraham knows about where, God bless our orthopedic chair. When we were running out of medicine doctors, I, at a chair meeting, asked, who can help? First person that raised their hand, chair of orthopedics. What do you need, Bob? And I told him. He said, well, my guys aren't operating anywhere. When do you need them? And he sent us orthopedic residents to help on the medicine service. That's the kind of, that's the kind of like pitching in at the moment. And then we had these people who were, as you point out, on our campus who were saying, oh, it's going to be no worse than flu. Oh, you're over exaggerating.
Yeah.
Oh, there's not going to be more than 10,000 deaths. Oh.
A Nobel laureate, no less. Yeah.
Stuff that you'd say, are you kidding me? I'm like worried that we're going to need to have, refrigerated trucks as morgues. And you're telling me that you don't believe this, that it's not true? Now, I only have a certain pay grade here, Eric, and up to my pay grade, I think that we had transparency and communication. We had open dialogue with our faculty. I talked to people who had other perspectives all the time. I live in a larger context here, and I was disappointed in how the responses went. I've spent my adult life in universities. I think we have a great social responsibility that goes along with the great social entitlements that we have. And I think leaders need to be willing to stand up and to say sometimes difficult things. And this one, like Abraham, I disagreed with the way things were handled. And that's tough to say in the setting of what you called us. And I think you're right. We're a great university with a lot of, with way more good being done than anything else. But it was, I don't think that will be looked back upon as one of our better chapters.
No, that's really well said, Bob. And I think it's necessary to acknowledge that not only was social media amplifying, good and bad messages, but this was an extremely politically divisive time. It was an extremely divisive time racially within the country. And so, the irony was we actually had a conference here on free speech, academic freedom, and many of the more liberal folks who wanted to attend were actually scared to attend because of how you would be labeled for the very fact of attending. So, that is a shame. I think it's a shame that political divisiveness has entered the campus in that fashion. And I think we would be remiss in not bringing up that the biggest threat to academic freedom right now is actually governors wanting to make changes in our curriculum. Now, that is the one area that, nobody has ever debated, that we have the right to set the curriculum. But, when you have the governor saying this is what you can teach and can't teach, that is, I think, when it really becomes absolutely necessary to define what is academic freedom, what are its parameters, and how far will you go to fight that?
And what is the governance of a university? I mean, the governance of the university is supposed to be its faculty. As you've said, Abraham, a faculty is supposed to have responsibility for the curriculum. I mean, Eric, at your alma mater, much in the news lately, University of Virginia, a far-right governor is appointing Board of Visitors members who want to maintain the Jeffersonian values of the university, dog whistle for a lot of really bad parts of our history regarding slavery and other things. How is this happening? How is a great university like the University of Virginia? How is a great university like Stanford, withstanding this? We're a little bit luckier, Abraham, in that we're a private university. We don't have to deal with some of the things that the University of Florida has to deal with, the University of Virginia has to deal with. But these are frightening times. And, as you know, Abraham, I'm not prone to exaggeration. And I look at this and think about, wow, where is this going? Because politicians of different ends of the spectrum definitely want to use the academy for their own political means, which are not necessarily in line with what data science, et cetera, would show you.
Right. I think the politics that Abraham's mentioned, and as you've reinforced with UVA and what's going on, not just at University of Florida, but throughout the state of Florida, with the Surgeon General there and the governor. I mean, these are scary things to see. This is the use of politics to detract from clear-cut, unequivocal advances in science, and well beyond that too. In terms of civil rights and whatnot. This is a scary time. But I go back to a point you made earlier about civility, because we have a lack of that, a very serious lack of that. Now, back in December 2021, I actually had a debate with Martin Kulldorff about the pandemic. And I didn't know Martin. And as you know, he's one of the trio of the Great Barrington Declaration, who had a lot of objections to how the pandemic was being managed, like almost everything. And Jay from Stanford is one of them as well. Now, when I had this debate, it was actually remarkable. It was civil. We both made our points, and you could come away from it as, okay, these people, they know their data or they have their views, but we don't see that. Like when Dr. Lopato, the Surgeon General of Florida, puts out a white paper, not even a preprint, that says, vaccines shouldn't be used in men. Boosters, should be outlawed. And then the governor gets behind. I mean, there's just no data to support. Oh, and not only it's killing, and not even myocarditis, it's killing them. Yeah. This is scary stuff because the public doesn't understand and no one reins it in. And there's no civil discourse about it. If you happen to put something, on Twitter, let's say, to the Florida Surgeon General, watch out because the mob goes after you. I mean, literally the mob. right? So we have a divisiveness that, is very scary. And now we also know that some institutions, the governance is afraid because of this issue of the politics and the social media potency. So do you see any remedy in sight? How do we get back to civility? How do we get back to balanced discourse where you hear both sides?
Yeah, I wish I could give you the answer, Eric. I mean, I'm very troubled by the lack of civility. And again, I like a good debate, a good argument, but you see lawsuits being filed. You see the public, the mob piling on, the bots that are out there just stirring up trouble. Our mutual friend, Rob Califf at the FDA, has spent much of the last year talking about the public health threat of disinformation, which is intentionally putting out information to cause harm. That's intended to cause harm.
Right.
Misinformation, which is being put out there in the intention to mislead and misinform. Rob spent much of the last year talking about this, and he's talked, publicly about getting the universities to step up and help with this. What is disinformation? Why is it a threat to the public health? What is misinformation? How does it affect the public health? And as you probably know, Eric, he's been skewered in multiple places, particularly online, by people with a certain political agenda to really try to lessen his point.
I've seen that, and he's saying that universities that don't articulate their position and how it differs from the rogue person are complicit.
Yep,
that's his base, and I couldn't agree more, because if there is no statement by the university early on to separate, it doesn't mean that the faculty member is fired. It just separates that this is not the opinion of the mainstream faculty or university, whatnot. So, yeah, I've watched Rob take lots of hits, and it seems that it's, not at all fair what he's gone through, because it's sensible what he's advocating, don't you think?
I think it's completely sensible. It made me think that with the comments of the Hoover faculty member who was spewing all sorts of misinformation, Stanford did put out a statement that said these are not the views of the university. The university is for masks. The university is for social distancing. Good public health behavior. But Eric, it's gotten even worse. We have one of our faculty members here, a leader in one of the departments, is married to a local public health official in one of our surrounding counties, and they had a police car sitting outside their house. 2 teenage children in their house. Their police car outside their house in order to protect the family. She's been sued and named in lawsuits multiple times, supported with depositions from faculty members against her. I mean, this is what we're at. That's not civility. That's not talking about, hey, I disagree with your ideas. Hey, I got some alternative data. Do you want to take a look at this? That's not that.
One of the things that strikes me listening to both of you is that word academic freedom is, we use it with such imprecision in a way. I mean, it means different things to everybody. And I think it's, even though we can't control the world, we can't control politics, I think we have a need to protect the reputation of our universities. And I think it begins by, before we have another episode like this, it begins with defining what is academic freedom, and making sure we have to do all these required courses. I think we need a course on what is academic freedom, what are the things that courts have defended, courts have not defended, just so people understand. And for me, the takeaway in preparing for this podcast was really the idea of, expertise in your discipline gives you the license to speak out. Not that you shouldn't if you don't, but it's clearly a little bit of a warning bell when your only qualification is you have a Nobel Prize in something completely different. Doesn't automatically give you the right to make pronouncements, especially as time goes on and they're wrong.
I call that intellectual arrogance, that because you're so good in one area, you think that automatically makes you good in another.
I think this was interesting because I had a great discussion with the founders of Substack regarding censorship. And why do they have anyone who wants to write Substack essays or newsletters? And of course, they have some of the notorious people who were banned from Twitter, who are now back on Twitter, who write these Substacks, right? And they're basically weaponizing them. I said to them, I understand, and I think that, by the way, Abraham's distinction between academic freedom and freedom of speech is really central here. I said, there is a line drawn where you are harming the health of people. A lot of things you'd say, oh, well, it's politics or, other disciplines. But when you're what you're spewing out, which is not based on facts, that are lies, that are frequently the basis of or the result of conspiracy theories, how can you tolerate that? And so the response of the Substack founders was, well, what we do is we try to weight the good evidence-based stuff and suppress or not, I'm not using the word shadow ban, but you know what I mean? It's like, we're not going to disseminate that or help advocate that. I said, that's not adequate. That's just not adequate. And this is the problem right now. What we have on Twitter, which is still a major platform for disseminating medical information, is we actually have the platform is doing just the opposite. It's actually brought back these people. Nobody's banned now, and they are basically suppressing whatever, if it's not because they have enough employees or because they're doing it actively. And so it's actually even harder to get out facts and evidence than ever before. So, we may actually be hitting a worse time than ever here because of this line of academic freedom and the inability for institutions to, a sense of powerless, that they basically want to be positioned as freedom of speech, and they don't want to be accused of muzzling a faculty member, because that could be even worse. So I know we don't have a solution here today. I didn't expect that we would, but it's been a really helpful discussion. And I guess before we wrap up, I'd love to get some further kind of final thoughts from Bob, as well as from you, Abraham.
As you were talking, Eric, it made me think of one other thing that I spent a lot of time thinking about, and that's this notion of science and health literacy. We may be at a low point in the country's history of people who not just understand science, but accept scientific truths as truth. And there are some things that are just true. The way gravity works is a truism. And I could list a whole bunch of them. There are just some things that are facts. They've moved beyond hypothesis to their facts. And we have a whole segment of the population that, for whatever reason, refuses to accept facts. What was this notion that Kellyanne Conway created? The alternative fact. Right. You talk about BS. There's some things that just are not true. And there's some things that are true. And to create these smoke and mirrors around things. And I do think, whether it's the failing of our educational system, the failing of our democracy, but people's inability to accept that some things are true is really a problem, because it's hard to have a democracy if you don't have a central core set of facts and beliefs and principles that we are all adhering to. Wrapped around all of that, I'll go back to the word civility. But I think, Eric, that people like you, people like Abraham, people like me, we have responsibility to keep talking about it. Because I do believe, I read Abraham's books, Eric. I read your articles. I read your tweets. It's one of the best sources of information about many, many things. And what I always say about you, Eric, that one of the reasons I followed you for years, you have great taste in science. You understand science, you have great taste in science, and you highlight things that are important for the rest of us. There's a few people I follow exclusively for that reason, is your taste in science. And I would ask our listeners out there, go into fields that you're not familiar with. Try to latch onto some folks who do have a voice in that field, getting back to Abraham's point about content matters and academic freedom, and learn from them. We're not all experts in everything.
I must say that I'm optimistic just because, amidst all that noise, both of you guys have a wonderful way of tweeting. And it's not just opinion tweets. You have papers highlighted in yellow with Eric. It's so helpful. I think that manages to rise above the noise. And we just have an obligation. You guys have an obligation to keep doing what you're doing. I think it's so much. You may not realize how important that is to counter the negative discourse out there.
Maybe it will get better as we emerge in a more stable time of the current pandemic, and it's just maybe not quite as emotionally charged as it has been. So thanks so much for joining us, Bob. Really enjoyed this discussion, and hopefully our listeners will as well.